I'm Mike Brofman, and welcome to another episode of Song and Wine, Brooklyn Art Song Society's web series, where we discuss our upcoming concerts and drink some awesome wine. I'm joined today with Edwin Cahill and Matthew Morris. Matthew is the baritone in our next concert, which is Hans Eisler's Hollywood Songbook, complete and unabridged. And Edwin is his partner and is a director and has put on a stage production of the work. But before we do that, I'd like to plug our wine, which is we get from Waterfront Wines on 360 Furman Street in Brooklyn Heights. They specialize in all natural and organic wines. Today we are drinking a Morange from Maison en Berly, a French Burgundy, and these are actually Burgundy cups. Or wine glasses.
Yes.
So let's give this a try.
L'chaim.
Cheers.
Zum Wohl.
These glasses have like a pitch.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
It's wonderful.
It's really good. And what makes Hans Eisler's Hollywood Songbook great?
Yeah, I think that it's one of the most extraordinary 20th century settings of some of the greatest poets that ever lived. And
I think it actually captures and is closer to our era, constantly being in and out of these wars and being displaced from your home and all this stuff that's going on in Syria and the immigration crisis, and it just has so many modern day resonances in one. And then the music is also astoundingly beautiful and has kind of gone through the filter of being in Schoenberg School and then coming to LA and writing film scores.
I think Eisler is sort of an interesting person, and I think who he was as a person is reflected in this work. You know, he was friends with Thomas Mann and Theodor Adorno, so he sort of, palled around with the Frankfurt School. He studied with Schoenberg, as you said, but he also worked in Hollywood. He was friends with communists. He was friends with Leonard Bernstein and Aaron Copland, who actually defended him when he ended up in front of the House of Un-American Activities Committee. So he was just sort of, in the center of modern culture and thinking. And I think this work, it reflects almost every major sort of ideology in the 20th century.
Hans Eisler is such a genius, and he's one of the most brilliant people that just kind of got wiped out of the general knowledge of classical music buffs. And he's not known, he's not heard, and it's just, I think it's totally a product not of the quality of his work, but of the time period in which he lived and all these immigrants that came and just kind of got displaced and their writing was kind of cut off.
the songs that he was writing at the time were very personal, and they were like diary entries, and they were not necessarily intended to be performed in the way we are today.
Yeah.
Because as he arrived in Hollywood and found himself in what Bertolt Brecht called the funeral parlor for the soul, and found himself with meager finances and a lot of challenges in a new climate where, of course, being German, it was oppressively hot. The only way he could survive the boredom and terror of the everyday experience of the studio was to go home and write his little Hollywood songbook. And I think there's something really extraordinary about that.
This work does, and he personally embodies the idea of the outsider. The theme of sort of man's loneliness, of not belonging, is, I think, an important one in his work and in sort of a lot of 20th century thought. And I think his life story made him uniquely capable of tapping into that in a way that probably a lot of other composers couldn't.
Despite the tragedy and despite the darkness that surrounded his life, I believe that there is an incredible lightness. And so there's this incredible ability to sort of face a tragedy and actually find either the humor or find the lightness, the chiaro and the scuro, which is actually what allowed him to keep going. That sort of encapsulates everything that's brilliant about Eisler, this sort of objective observer who is channeling the deepest tragedies with actually the most beautiful melody.
Hans Eisler really has a melodic gift. He writes melodies that compete with Schubert.
Just say what needs to be said and nothing more. And it strikes me as that it's clean, like it's pristine. It's stripped of junk or excess or schlock or rather than sounding modern in a way that's like, ugh, it's fresh to the ear, and it kind of sticks with you because it's beautiful in a way that you just don't hear very often.
I think the phrase to use one of my favorite jazz albums, Thelonious Monk, "Straight No Chaser," I think is a good way to describe it.
That's a great way to describe it. His work is fragmentary. The poets he chose are very fragmentary.
Yeah.
Brecht, Hölderlin was known famously for writing in fragments at the
Yeah.
time. That was shocking. You know?
Yeah.
You can look at a lot of the other texts, and they are fragments.
I don't think I've ever seen the word Hölderlin without the word fragment next to it.
Right, exactly. And the Greek fragments. The other thing I would say is that the trend of Bertolt Brecht's period of time, one that Hans Eisler definitely embraced,
Yeah.
would have been a very neutral vessel approach to performing, the anti-romantic
Yeah.
movement. And so a song recital, if it's done with the great artists that we have available to us, like Matthew and Christina, who are capable of achieving that simplicity without it being a straitjacket,
Yeah.
then I think that is very close to the style that both Brecht and Eisler would have been looking for in there.
At that, I'm going to remind you all to come on November 4th to Hans Eisler's Hollywood Songbook at the Brooklyn Historical Society. It's Christina Bacharach, soprano, Nils Neubert, tenor, and Matthew Morris, baritone, myself, and Miri Sugiyama on piano. Tickets at brownpapertickets.com. Come at 7 for the pre-concert lecture. And until next time, where we'll be discussing Mahler, cheers.
Prosit!